Hey, welcome back to the Confidad podcast. My name is Dan. So grateful to have you here with us today. We'll begin today like we do every day, reminding yourself and myself what is true about fatherhood. Say this out loud with me. I am the only one who can fulfill the father role I have, so I choose to do it well. I get to show up well for my kids. Imperfection is reality. Ownership is a choice. Today is brand new, so is tomorrow. I am wholly loved, so I will love wholly. Today in our equipping section, I want to continue teaching on the time well spent method and talk to you about how hearing our kids requires prompts and posture. Prompts, what's a prompt? Just a question, right? And not just any old question like, did you have fun at school today? Or did you like what you had for lunch today? Or did you play with any friends today? Did you make a new friend today? You know what all those are? Did you? Questions always are answered with yes or no. Okay? That's not an open-ended question. An open-ended question is one that they can't just give you one-word answers. Good, yes, no. Open-ended questions are important because our kids aren't always open to sharing. And if we're, trying to set up these windows 3 times a day to connect with our kids and listen to them and spend intentional time well spent together, they're not always open to sharing. We have to be mindful of that. We have to be flexible in that. But as we do this consistently, our kids are going to start looking forward to these windows of time throughout the day where they go, oh, I know dad is going to show up and be ready to listen in this moment. And so eventually, they're just going to know that this is a moment where, this is when I get to talk about what's going on deep in my heart, deep in my head, whatever's going on in my day. Okay? So, open-ended questions help prompt your kids to start sharing, especially if they're in a mood not to share. And Adam Grant in Think Again says this: the most effective way to help people open their minds is to listen. Okay? So, if we want our kids to start opening up to you about what's going on in their mind, we've got to start listening. But it's not like parenting isn't only just teaching them right from wrong and correcting them and saying this is the right thing and this is the wrong thing and don't do this and do this and then you're good. And always talking, especially dads. We struggle to shut our mouths and open our ears, right? That old adage, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Let's do it. Let's listen twice as much as we talk in these windows of time well spent with our kids. The understanding here is that we have these open-ended questions. I'll give you a list of them because you can jot them down here, or maybe even send me a list of open-ended questions that you use with your kids. I would love to hear what they have to say. But things like, help me know. When do you feel most seen by me? What am I doing when you feel I'm really listening to you? How well do I know you? What about you do you wish I knew better? What scares you? What makes you excited? What do you think about when you're laying in bed? Tell me about the things you're going on at school. Tell me what you're talking about your friends with. This one I really like, but it's pretty deep. So maybe save it for a conversation down the road when this relationship's been established a little bit more. But if you really knew me, you would know that blank, and have your kid answer that about themselves, right? Your kid would say, well, Dad, if you really know who I was, you would know XYZ. Here's the other part of the hearing in time well spent method is that posture matters. When your kids are ready to share, ready to open up to you, and that you're listening, it matters a whole lot about what your body is telling them, okay? The posture that you have, what you're communicating with your body language. It's going to tell your kid what's going on inside of your mind. So maybe your mind races with thoughts all the time and you just can't slow them down and it's always racing another nut. And if you're like, oh yeah, buddy, that's so cool. Okay, I'm real guilty of this. Okay, so real talk for a second, diagnosed with ADHD in September of 2024. And it really started to open up this is making a lot more sense is how I've interacted with my kids and my wife for, the almost 15 years we've been married is oh man, I always thought I was a really good listener. It's not that I'm a good listener, is that when things are interesting, I perk up really, really like, I'm all in on the interesting stuff. The stuff that's boring, that loses my interest, I could not be a worse listener in. And so what I'm doing with my mind, what I'm doing with my body, what I'm doing with my face needs to be intentional. It needs to be communicating, right? In these little 5-minute windows, 3 times a day, specifically and at least in those windows, I'm here to listen. Okay. You know, the old TV show where the dad's sitting in his recliner with his newspaper, the kid walks in from the bus and he's like, hey son, hope you had a great day at school. Get your old man a beer, right? Like, what is that communicating to the son, to the child? Hey, I'm busy catching up on the news of the day. My feet are up. I want you to serve me, get me a beer or whatever, and I'll talk maybe later. Okay. The modern version of that is a phone in your hand in front of your face. Oh, yeah, buddy. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for telling me. Yeah, that's great. But all the while, we're giving these cues that, like, I don't actually care what you have to say. Okay. So our posture really matters. What's in our hands, what is in our minds, what is all around us matters as it communicates something to our kid. Just like all behavior is communication from your kid to us, or honestly from us to them. But our posture, what we have going on with our body and around us matters as we say to our kids, hey, I'd love to know, what'd you have for lunch today? And did you like it? Did you try something new today? What scared you today? What made you sad? Tell me one thing that really made you happy today. All those open-ended questions are saying one thing, like, hey, open up and tell me what's going on. But if our body language is communicating the exact opposite of what that question is trying to draw out of them, they will pick up on the body language. They will pick up on the fact that we have a phone in our hand. Honestly, it's really hard, but most of the time I try to keep my phone like in another room when I'm trying to engage intentionally with my kids through this method. One of the best times I've found to do the hearing moment of the time well spent method is actually at night, sitting next to their bed. It's dark. My phone's not in the room. They are relaxing and starting to kind of unwind from the day, and their heads often are spinning in those moments. They are starting to ask things like, oh yeah, I was thinking about this thing today, Dad, and what do you think about this? Now, you might be tired. You might have more work to do. You might have a house to clean up or a dirty kitchen or whatever, but can you set a 5-minute timer and just say, I'm going to listen to my kid for these 5 minutes as they're laying in bed, ask them a question, maybe 2, stay one question longer than you usually would, and just start to hear them and really tune in to like what's going on in their head as they're wrestling through or wondering about, okay? One of the questions that our second child asked a couple of years ago, he was probably 7 or 8 at the time, was, hey, Dad, what even is the point of Earth? It's like, what? Tell me more. I needed to buy myself some time before I, quote unquote, answered this question, right? I was like, well, what do you mean, buddy? Tell me more about that. He's like, well, we're born hopefully into like a good family and maybe have some siblings because that's fun. And then we grow up and we go to school and then we go to college, hopefully, or go get a job and do something we love. And then we work and maybe get married and have kids ourselves. And then our kids leave the house and then we retire. And then we just kind of, well, what do retired people do? I was like, I don't know, buddy. And then we die. What's the point of Earth? I was like, you're 8, child. Why are you asking me this question? Internally, I didn't say that out loud. But then we were able to have a discussion. And I got to know that, like, I only ever thought that my older son was a deep thinker because he asked questions like that all the time. But because I had taken time and I had created space and I had the posture and the prompt to say, what's going on? What are you thinking about these days? He felt safe to come to me with a question like that. Do your kids feel safe to come to you with questions? Do they feel safe to come to you with controversial questions? With things that they're wrestling through that they might be embarrassed or ashamed about? With things that they've seen or heard or done that they feel guilty about? Are you a safe space for your child to be heard, to be understood? The answer is no. I'm not trying to make you feel shameful or guilty or bad about this. I'm trying to hold up a mirror long enough that you feel the discomfort and you go, you know what? I think I need to make a change. And this change is like, it's a long road change, right? There's this Christian pastor and author who talked about following Jesus, and he said it's a long obedience in the same direction. And as I think about relationship building with our families, with our kids, you think when you're 75 years old, you want to have a certain type of relationship and life with your family? It's pretty similar. It's a long obedience in the same direction. It's a long commitment to that vision in the same direction. So what's your first step? What's the next best thing that you can do to build that safe environment at home for your kids? Because the life that they're living, the environment that they're growing up in is so different from you and I. It's so different even from, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, with the internet in their pockets and access to things that we never had access to. And they will run to the safest place to find the answers to their questions. And are they running to you? Or are they running to a friend, the internet? I don't know about you, but I want my kids to be continuing to run to me, to ask those hard questions, for me to be able to say, I hear you. I understand you. I've wrestled with that too. You see, when we take intentional time to spend listening to our kids, it builds that bridge. It builds that bridge between us. It transforms it from that rope bridge as an infant to that boardwalk bridge, and eventually to a Golden Gate style bridge, where they know no matter what I say to my parents, no matter what question I have, what confession I have, the things, they will always respond with love. They will always respond with care, with understanding, with a type of connection and love that says, you're okay, I'm okay, we'll get through this together. Is it easy? No. Is it perfect? No. Is it without complaint and without all these other things? No, it's not. But is it significant? Is it worthwhile? Is it a legacy that you're proud of? Yeah, I think so. So here's to you, spending some time today asking a few questions and showing up without a phone in your hand, without having some external distraction that's going to get in the way, or internal distraction, get in the way of you connecting with your kid today in a really intentional, caring, and loving way. May you be empowered today to just a little bit become more of the dad that your kids need. We'll see you in the next episode.